The insertion tube, the flange, the Liletta IUD, the IUD strings, the rod, the ring of the rod, the first or the top indent, and the second or the bottom indent. To prepare the IUD, make sure the device which is still in the sterile pouch is on a flat surface. Open the sterile pouch from the bottom by folding the plastic up 1/3 of the way to expose the IUD threads, rod, and insertion tube. This is similar to how the Paragard packaging is opened, and different from the Mirena, in which the package is opened completely. After opening the IUD, the device will need to be loaded into the insertion tube. To do this, pull back on the blue threads to release them from the flange, but make sure not to pull the IUD down at the same time. Notice that the strings of the Liletta are blue, whereas they are white for the Paragard and gray for the Mirena. Next, grasp the thread and the insertion tube with your non-dominant hand, and remove the rod from the pouch with your dominant hand. Insert the rod into the insertion tube until the 5 cm mark. This differs from the insertion device for the Mirena IUD, which doesn't use a rod, and it differs from the Paragard IUD in that the Liletta rod is inserted into the insertion tube before, not after, the IUD is loaded into the insertion tube. With your dominant hand, hold the insertion tube and the rod firmly between your fingers and thumb, and with your non-dominant hand, pull both blue threads downward to draw the IUS into the insertion tube, until the knobs on the lateral arms form a hemispherical dome. This facilitates passage through the cervical os. Do not pull it too far down into the insertion tube, and if you do, do not use the device or attempt to reload it. Note that the arms bend up, away from the stem, just like when the Mirena is loaded, and opposite of the Paragard, in which the arms bend down until they are alongside the stem, inside of the insertion device. Next, adjust the flange as you would for the Mirena or Paragard IUD by sliding it so that the upper edge corresponds to the sound measurement. Make sure that it is parallel to the IUD arms and maintain a firm pinch at the bottom of the insertion tube. With your non-dominant hand, grab the tenaculum and apply gentle traction to align the cervical canal and the uterine cavity. With your dominant hand, slide the loaded IUD through the cervical canal. Like when inserting the Mirena, stop when the upper end of the flange is 1.5 to 2 centimeters away from the cervix, and do not advance the flange to the cervix at this step. Remember, the measurement you took during sounding was to the top of the uterus, and if you release the Liletta when the phalange is against the cervix, there will not be enough room for the IUD arms to open up in the next step. Note that this step is similar to the Mirena, but different from the Paragard, in which you advance the insertion device until the flange contacts the cervix. The next step is to release the arms of the IUD from the insertion tube. To do this, gently release the tenaculum and use that hand to grab the ring of the rod. Use your dominant hand to gently pull back the insertion tube to the second or the bottom indent of the rod. This will allow the arms of the IUD to expand in the lower uterine segment. Take care not to let go of the insertion tube or the rod. Wait 10 to 15 seconds for the arms to fully open. With your non-dominant hand, grab the tenaculum again and apply gentle traction like before. With your dominant hand, simultaneously advance the insertion tube and the rod up to the uterine fundus and stop when you feel slight resistance. At this point, the flange should be touching the cervix and the IUD should be at the uterine fundus. Releasing the Liletta is very similar to the Paragard but differs from the Mirena, which uses a slider function on the insertion device. After the device is deployed, you will still need to release the IUD from the insertion tube. To do this, gently release your hold on the tenaculum and use this free hand to re-grab the ring of the rod. With your dominant hand, which is still holding the insertion tube, pull the insertion tube back to the ring of the rod. This differs from the Mirena IUD, which is released by pulling the slider function all the way down. You should feel a pop when the IUD comes out of the insertion tube. To remove the insertion tube and rod, withdraw the rod from the insertion tube, but do not let go of the insertion tube. Pull the rod all the way out to prevent it from catching on the knot at the lower end of the IUD, which could result in the IUD being dislodged. After the rod is fully removed, you may remove the insertion tube. Next, trim the strings by using a blunt tip scissors. Leave 3 centimeters from the cervix and do not cut the strings at an angle, which can result in sharp ends. Also, do not pull the strings or the device may become displaced.